Vladimir Putin has just imposed martial law in Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia. This hasty step reveals Russia's president aims to cement his grip over 4 annexed Ukrainian areas. According to military analysts, it is a last-ditch effort to keep the regions under control, but it also serves a much deeper and more sinister goal. Find out why Putin has proclaimed martial law in Ukraine in today's new blockbuster video. Why did Putin impose martial law in Ukrainian regions under his control? Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, has imposed martial law in Ukrainian territory that Moscow claims it partially annexed last month, but is struggling to hold in the face of an ongoing counteroffensive. In statements made to members of his Security Council on television on Wednesday, Putin said the new policies were intended to increase the security authority of each regional governor in Russia in order to support a special military operation. The proclamation is Putin's most recent escalation in response to a string of severe battlefield losses since the beginning of September. What does the new rule contain? The martial law readiness levels established by Putin's edict differ both within Russia and in the Russian-occupied regions of Ukraine. The Russian-occupied Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk areas range from basic throughout Russia to maximum. The directive establishes territorial defense centers with undefined responsibilities. It extends broad emergency powers to Russian-installed governors in the 4 zones of most outstanding readiness to meet the needs of Russia's armed forces. Authorities can also impose curfews that keep people inside their houses and restrict movement. The territory was previously declared off-limits to people for 7 days by Russian-appointed officials in Kherson, under mounting pressure from a Ukrainian counteroffensive. The leader of the Russian-installed government, Vladimir Putin, was quoted by state-run news agency TASS on Wednesday as saying that a curfew was not necessary for the time being, soon before declaring that he was handing over responsibility to the military. Putin had issued an evacuation order across the Dnieper River just before Putin's declaration, directing people to migrate in any area of Russia and announcing that the Russian government would offer housing vouchers. The evacuation was referred to as a propaganda performance by Ukraine. Additionally, the directive gives governments the power to temporarily resettle citizens under duress. While the United States assessed in September that Russia may have forcefully deported between 900,000 and 1.6 million Ukrainians, Ukraine has accused Russia of doing so. Further, the imposition of martial law in Russia always results in the total or partial mobilization of military forces. It is still being determined if more men will be called up because a partial mobilization has already started in Russia and spread to the occupied regions. Additionally, the decree mandates unnamed mobilization efforts in the economic arena. According to an analysis by the Washington-based Institute for the Study of War, this will likely give Putin's mobilization of at least 300,000 Russian men economic and industrial support. Why is martial law being declared now? The ISW described Putin's declaration as primarily legal theater, aimed to justify actions the Russian military must do or is currently taking while laying the groundwork for future mobilization and domestic limitations in a statement on Thursday. It added, these moves are likely necessary to fulfill basic military requirements, such as feeding, housing, equipping, and transporting mobilized and conscripted troops to the front lines, forcing defense contractors or other private businesses to align with government production requirements, and more easily controlling both the Russian population and the Ukrainian civilian populations in Russian-occupied parts of Ukraine. The declaration of martial law is the most recent in a sequence of escalating actions taken by Russia in response to its significant battlefield losses on the southern and eastern fronts. The governor of the southern Ukrainian region of Mykolaiv, Vitaly Kim, stated that he thought Putin's decision was made to allow Russia to mobilize our people who have remained in the occupied area. A violation of the Geneva Conventions on Conduct in Conflict is when civilians are forced to serve in the armed forces of an occupying state. According to the ISW, Putin may be establishing conditions for a less conventional sort of under-the-radar mobilization, the development of territorial defense forces in the pattern of Ukrainian forces. World's criticism of Moscow. Mikhailo Podolyak, a presidential advisor for Ukraine, claimed on Twitter that martial law does not change anything for Ukrainian soldiers. We keep on liberating and removing occupants from our territories. The former chairman of the Kherson region's aide Sergei Klin claimed that Putin's goal was to create a kind of panic in Kherson and an image to fuel propaganda. The National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine's secretary, Alexei Danilov, called Moscow's action unlawful. Putin's martial law in the annexed regions of Ukraine is preparation for the mass deportation of the Ukrainian population to depressed areas of Russia in order to change the ethnic composition of the occupied territory, Danilov said. President of the United States Joe Biden stated that the action was evidence that Putin had been placed in a tough situation. Earlier, the U.S. State Department claimed that Russia was using desperate measures to hold on to the annexation-affected areas. Putin's extreme measures to strengthen his hold over Ukrainians and Russians come after a string of humiliating losses, including crushing battlefield defeats, sabotage, and problems with troop mobilization. Regions of Ukraine that Russia claims it has annexed. According to Vladimir Saldo, between 50,000 and 60,000 residents of 4 towns on the west bank of the Dnieper River will depart in an organized, gradual displacement throughout the following 5 to 6 days. Saldo added that the entire Moscow-installed government in Kherson would leave as well. The number of people waiting in line for boats on the Dnieper River bank was visible on Russian television, though it was not immediately apparent how many were departing. Saldo's comments come after General Sergei Surovikin, the new commander of Russian forces in Ukraine, stated the situation in Kherson, Ukraine's southernmost city, is formidable, and people fearing Ukrainian bombing will be evacuated. A war crime is when an occupying power forcibly removes or deports the civilian populace from its territory. Russian forces attacking energy facilities. The governor of the western Ukrainian province of Vinnytsia, Suri Borzov, said Russia had also attacked energy installations in his area. Dmytro Orlov, the mayor of the southern city next to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station, which has been a hotspot in the almost 8-month conflict, stated that on October 19, Russian bombardment also shut out power and water in several areas of Enerhodar in the Zaporizhzhia region. The early hours of October 19 saw Russian forces launch another kamikaze drone attack on the southern Ukrainian region of Mykolaiv. The Ukrainian military's Southern Command announced on October 19 that its forces shot down 12 drones overnight. According to the regional governor, Russian shelling also significantly damaged a power plant in Kryvyi Rih, a city in south-central Ukraine, rendering villages, towns, and a municipal district without energy. Airstrikes destroyed nearly 1/3 of Ukraine's power plants over a week, and more than 1,000 villages experienced power outages. Will Moscow succeed in its plans to continue with the martial law system? The president was able to avoid holding individuals at the bottom of the food chain accountable, avoid using state monies to assist those in need, and muddle accountability thanks to this legislative haze. After all, errors are unavoidable in the lack of clear guidelines and directions, and someone was always willing to accept responsibility. The president appeared satisfied despite Russia's terrible handling of the pandemic and was clearly aware of the formula, which calls for adding superstructures to already existing ones, assigning responsibilities to lower levels of government, and obscuring the legislative process. Putin's popularity has already suffered greatly due to the recent military drought, and Russians are now experiencing more significant anxiety. Putin may now blame Mishustin, Sobyanin, and the regional governors for any criticism of the drought to prevent the Kremlin from losing further of the president's support. Putin's frustration with the defense ministry and government officials in army procurement is evident. The governors Mishustin and Sobyanin are now the civilian administrators in charge of organizing the military's supply. Putin is admitting that the vertical power system he established is incredibly ineffective by stoking legislative uncertainty and shifting power mechanisms from official institutions to temporary emergency organizations at both the federal and regional levels. In order to improve the system, the president uses councils, commissions, and headquarters as ad hoc project management offices. Putin's order is his latest move to signal action in Ukraine, as Russia's military has faced a string of embarrassing losses in the northeast and may soon lose its hold on Kherson in the south. Hope you liked the video. If yes, then press the like button and share your opinion on the current situation of the war.